Why are we insisting on the word happiness? Because we're thinking long-term here. We're thinking about a revolution in the way people think about the good life. A revolution in terms of the way people think and pursue life's ultimate currency. Happiness. Happiness studies as a field focuses on much more than positive psychology. In fact, it focuses on much more than psychology. It looks at what philosophers had to say about the good life, and it looks at theology and neuroscience and history and economics and film and literature. What we decided to do at the Happiness Studies Academy is salvage happiness. In other words, help people understand the true, the deep, the real meaning of a happy life. Precisely to talk about the fact that a happy life is about pleasure, and it's also about a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And it's about relationships and generosity and giving. And it's about intellectual well-being. It's about learning. And if we, through education, teach people that happiness is about pleasure, and happiness is about meaning, and it's about relationships, and it's about physical health, and it's about intellectual development. When people truly understand that all these elements make up the concept of happiness, then they will be more likely to pursue that, more likely to attain it, more likely to help others attain it, more likely to create a better world. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome from Hungary and New Jersey. You can see you out the window here, and Mexico and Argentina, and Brazil and Israel and Denmark and Ireland and, wow, Florida, Poland. Amazing. Welcome wherever you are, whenever you are. It's wonderful to be here with you. It's a very special day today, I must say, for me. Do you know, I don't know if you've ever experienced that. It happened to me actually a couple of times throughout my life. I was walking, either it was New York City, or I remember once when I was in LA, and suddenly I saw a celebrity. And before it registered that, oh yeah, I saw that person in a movie, I just said hi to them as if, of course we know each other, we've seen each other many times. Then I remembered, oh no, they don't know me. Well, I'm getting the same feeling today, I must say, because I've been reading Amy Wrzesniewski's work for years. I've spoken, those of you who've been to my lectures must have heard me talk about her and her work multiple times. And I'm feeling the same way as if I'm seeing, I don't know, Denzel Washington now. And so hi, Amy. It's so great to have you here. Amy today is teaching at Wharton Business School. Before that, she spent 17 years at Yale Business School. Before that, at NYU. And she was a PhD student at Michigan. University of Michigan, where she did work, very important work on job crafting. And I'm so excited, Amy, that you're here with us, that I get to say hello to you, and now you can say hello back to me, unlike Denzel Washington, who doesn't know me from Adam. Great to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tal. I'm thrilled to be here, and I have to say, I feel a bit the same way that you're reporting feeling, because I have followed the work that you've done and the incredible things that you've built with it over many years now. So I'm thrilled to be here and to be able to spend this time with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So here is how today is going to work. We're going to start with, first of all, with you and I just chatting. I have many questions for you. That should take us no more than 5-6 hours. And then we'll leave another 5-6 hours. No, that should take, about 30 minutes or so. And then we'll invite questions from our wonderful audience. And in our audience, we have, I can see many people from the Happiness Studies Academy some are on our certificate program, others in our master's program. And then we have people from other walks of life who are eager to learn from you. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Job crafting. We hear about it from the mouth of the, as my kids would say, the OG, the original.
Absolutely. I suppose it begins with a story, and as most things do. And the story of job crafting starts at the University of Michigan, where I was working on a research project with Jane Dutton, a professor there, and Galai Debeba, who was a doctoral student there also. And we were studying people who clean hospital rooms for a living. And we were interested in this population because the literature, in the research literature on work, had suggested that this would be work that people would experience as not very motivating and not very meaningful and not very satisfying. And I had been doing research looking at people's experience of different kinds of work as a job or as a career or as a calling, and already suspected that there would be perhaps quite a bit of variance in people's experience of this hospital cleaning job. And so Jane and Galai and I went into this setting and we interviewed people, we shadowed them, we interviewed their managers, we spent time at the hospital. And in the analysis of our data, we realized that there were two groups that talked about the work in really different ways around how skilled or difficult the job was. And we couldn't find any variable or explanation for why one group described it as high skill and high difficulty, and the other group described it as low skill or low difficulty. And it was in digging through the data and trying to figure out what was different about these two groups of cleaning staff members that we realized they were doing very different jobs. They were both doing the job that they had been hired to do. They were faithfully executing their duties in their job description. But in the group that described the work as more skilled or more difficult, they were making all kinds of deviations from the job design. So they were, and this is important, I think, for job crafting, they were accomplishing what it was that the organization wanted them to do and needed them to do. But the ways in which they were doing it, the additional things they were doing, the variations on a theme, if you will, that they were making in their tasks and in their relationships, and in how they thought about the work were really quite different. And so this was the beginning of trying to understand what is happening as people are redrawing the boundaries of their jobs in ways that their managers may know about and support, or may not even be aware are happening, but seem to matter a lot for the kind of meaning and identity people are able to realize in their work.
So specifically, you have, cleaners in hospitals, janitors. They have
Yes.
a job description.
Yes.
What were they doing differently? There are three groups, right? There the job group, there is the career group, there is the calling group. What did they actually look like? So if I'm looking at them, would I see differences,
Yes.
or is it mostly their perception? Is it both?
So it's both. And I'm glad that you raised that question, because I think that's one of the things that is so important and I think promising about job crafting, is that it's not just getting people to think about the work that they're doing differently and to believe something different about the same work, but it in fact has real behavioral implications for what people are doing on the job. So for example, the people who were engaging in job crafting, who were being quite proactive and agentic about redrawing the task boundaries and the relational boundaries and the cognitive boundaries of their work, we're doing things like forming relationships with patients and their family members, getting to know them, getting to observe what was happening with patients who seemed to be lonely, not having visitors, doubling back and spending time in those rooms. They were doing things like forging relationships with nurses and clerks on the unit to learn more about what that patient might need. And sometimes that involved finding things out about the patient that technically the cleaning staff member might not have had the typical, lanes of authority to know, but were useful to them in tailoring the timing or the nature of the cleaning they were doing for that patient. And so they were engaging in all kinds of activities and interactions that were intended to buttress and support the kind of care they felt they were involved with around the patients. What was interesting in this context was, and hospital contexts certainly differ on this, but in this particular context, the cleaning staff members had been told that they should not interact with patients or their visitors unless a question or a request is made of them. And what we found instead was happening was, for this group that was crafting, they were extremely proactive. Some of them ended up forming relationships where they were writing to patients and their families for years after that patient
Wow.
was discharged. And so they really weren't just thinking of the work differently, they were executing the job in a very different way.
So it's both they were thinking about differently, maybe from the outset, and that led to behavioral change. And then obviously also was inspired by, but also led to very different emotional experience of their work. So you have, the ABC of psychology here: the affect, the behavior, and the cognition.
Yes, absolutely. The cleaning staff members who were job crafting, I think, saw themselves much more as part of the care team in the hospital. I think they saw themselves as much more central to the mission of the organization of healing patients and caring for patients and their families while someone's hospitalized. And I think it transformed what the experience of that work was like for them. And it transformed how they could author themselves and to others, that their role was quite a bit different than being perhaps held quite separately from the core of what the organization was all about, in ways that I think were transformative for them.
Amazing. So over the years, you've been studying, I know you've studied many professions and many work domains. Can we maybe put a little bit of more meat on the skeleton, so more concrete on the theory? What would a manager say in a bank? What would their work look like if they were seeing the work as a job, or a career, or a calling?
So if we think about a manager in a bank seeing their work in each of these three ways, so this is research that I want to credit my colleagues, so Paul Rosen, Barry Schwartz, and Rick McCauley in this original work. We were very interested in looking at the thoughts and the feelings and behaviors that would go along with seeing work in each of these three ways. And the way that we define a job orientation, and what we have found, is people who orient toward a job as a job see it primarily as a means to a financial end. So it is a way to support your life outside of work, perhaps support your family, support your leisure activities. But work is essentially about an exchange with an organization that helps you support yourself. And there's not as much other kind of reward or substance, if you will, to the relationship to the job than that. And so a bank manager who saw the work that way, I'm not saying that they would be doing a bad job at all, but would see the work as something that I've put good work in, my income comes out, and that is what I'm seeking from this domain of my life, and I'm not seeking much else from it. Whereas one who saw it as a career would be more focused on the advancement within the occupation of banking that would be possible through that work, whether that was meaning staying at the same bank and trying to move up to become, head manager or perhaps even regional manager, or if it would mean moving to different banks as they worked their way up in that occupation, with all of the increases in prestige and power and status that come with an occupational climb that people might be on. And so for people, the bank manager who saw the work as a career, there would likely be a lot of attention to making sure they had the kind of exposure they needed to be identified as someone who could be fast-tracked for promotions, or perhaps put in charge of the region, or lead a task force that could get them some visibility so that they could continue this climb. And in the third instance, a bank manager who saw their work as a calling, where the work was not primarily a means to a financial end or primarily a means to career advancement. The focus of the work would be on the fulfillment that they would receive from the work itself, where the work is an end in itself as opposed to a means to an end. And often people who see their work as a calling see that work as contributing to society in ways that are meaningful for them. Even if you or I might look at that occupation and not necessarily see what kind of social contribution the work makes. What matters is it is evident in the eyes of the person holding the job. And so in the case of a bank manager who sees the work as a calling, what I would expect there would be someone who would feel as though this work is inherent to their identity. It is central to how they think about who they are in the world and the role that they play in the world. They would likely, based on the research that we've done, spend more time at work, be more behaviorally involved with the work. They may frame the work as giving people access to the kinds of loans or financial support they need to make their own dreams come true in a way that is profoundly meaningful to them. They may see the role that they play as being essential to the functioning of the society or the town or the city in which they operate. And so those would be, I think, the primary ways in which these three different types of orientations would differ in that role.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of mortgage officer that we worked with 10, 12 years ago when we bought our home. And she was all very excited about her work. And at the end, after we had worked with her for a while, and again, from the outside, it seemed like she was basically getting us to sign here and sign there and tell us that this is, 3.1 and this is 3.3%. It seemed.
Yes.
She was all very excited. I said to her, you love your work, don't you? And she said, I absolutely do. And I said, why? And she said to me the following sentence, which I'll never forget. She said, because every day I get to help people fulfill their dreams. And I'm going to do the same for you today. We bought our dream house thanks to her work. Now,
that's profound. Yes.
Yeah. So, Amy, we see it around us a lot. The thing is, we also see it within us. And my question is, so you can categorize janitors or bank managers, or I know there was even research on hairdressers and engineers. You can categorize, some engineers, some hairdressers in this, in the job, career, or calling. So that's difference among people, differences between. What about within? Because I have days when I don't feel like doing my work. Yeah, I have many days where it's a calling and I just can't wait, to write or to teach. But not every day is like that. And
Right.
I don't think I'm the only one here, even among those who see their work as a calling generally. Yeah. So what do you see there?
So what I see there, you remind me of one of my favorite lines that someone ever used in a conversation with me about this, where they said something like, whether I see my work as a job, career, or calling depends on who I've just hung up the phone with. and what that conversation or that meeting was about. And so I can appreciate that, yes, in the day-to-day movement between the kinds of tasks and interactions that we have to have, we may feel differently about our engagement with those tasks or how excited we are to have particular meetings or exchanges with people. The thing that I think matters, and this goes to the heart of things that I know you care about and study and have brought to the world around happiness, is, are we talking about a rootedness or a relationship to the work where the work is more about a set of underlying, powerful, impactful, meaningful, purpose-driven goals that matter across one's life and perhaps even beyond one's life in terms of the contribution that one could make to people's lives in getting them into the homes that are making their dreams come true or helping to teach students and shape their lives in that way, that I think having that kind of rootedness or framing or understanding or relationship to the work can make a huge difference in sustaining people through a tough week, an unrewarding project, a difficult manager, a downturn in, a certain kind of project or work that they're doing, versus a relationship to the work that is about how much fun am I having at any given point in time. There will always be fun moments. There will always be moments that are not very pleasurable or fun. But in those moments that are not so pleasurable or fun, is there a sustained sense of importance of what it is that you're accomplishing through the work that can keep you going through those times? And that difference is something that I end up spending a lot of time trying to help my students understand and appreciate, that thinking about the work that they're choosing to do as something that, at the end of each day, they're doing a Yelp review or a kind of like, was today great? Yes or no, is potentially a setup for disappointment. That, the better question is, did I do something that mattered today? Am I working towards something that I think matters in the world beyond just the paycheck that it is giving me, which certainly matters. I don't want to minimize that, or beyond any kind of other accolades or anything else that work might give to me. Is it at core about something that I feel I believe in? Because that is, I think, where motivation ends up getting most sustained.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Just last week in our weekly webinar, we were talking about the difference between two approaches to measuring happiness or well-being. One is overall, are you satisfied with your life? Overall, how are things going? Versus moment by moment, how are you feeling now? And now, and now, and then aggregating it. And there are very
Yes.
different approaches to studying happiness. And I think what you're saying is that when we think about work crafting, we're thinking about the big picture mattering, the big overall because you're not necessarily about the momentary experiences, which of course fluctuate for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'd like some tips. So
Okay.
let's say I'm at working in a place where things are okay, but basically falling into the trap that Henry David Thoreau talked about, 1840, I believe, who said that most people live lives of quiet desperation, or that another great philosopher, Roger Waters, I believe, said, we're comfortably numb. So
Yes.
let's say, in that, nothing is terrible, but I'm comfortably numb, or, quiet desperation. How do I move up? How do I go into passion, calling
Yes.
from that?
So this is, I think this is a crucial question. And I think that the evolution in what I study and how I study it is very much tied up with that question. Because if I started out in the research that I do being interested in what different types of relationships or orientations do people have to their work, and why do those orientations matter? How do they have an influence on their experience? That leads you to a place, I think, of thinking about choosing the right thing, right? Choosing the right kind of work, the right kind of job, the right field, whatever it may be, so that you might experience your work in a way that maybe accords more with what you desire. That's very different from, to your question, thinking about, start with where you're planted, start with where you're starting from, and think about, are there things that I could do? Are there things that the organization or the leadership or the management could do that could improve my experience of what it is to be here and to be working here? And I think around the job crafting work, that is a lot of what the focus is around. That is to think about, given a starting point of any job, where might you have degrees of freedom? And these may be hidden degrees of freedom from, the managers, from the leaders in the organization, where you can begin to alter how you spend your time and energy and attention in ways that allow you to get more nourishment, if you will, out of that work, in terms of where you're spending your time, who you're spending it with, the skills that you're practicing or developing, how you are focusing on certain aspects of the mission or the responsibilities in your job that feed you the most from a psychological perspective. And I think just the act of eking out sometimes small amounts of agency and small amounts of will that you can exert in the work to do it in a way that accords more with what you care about can be enormously impactful for people.
Yeah, a little bit like, one candle can light up an entire dark room. So it's not like you need to transform everything about your work to experience the change as meaningful and deep.
Yes, yes.
So
I,
you're saying,
yep, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that this means, for teaching my students is that I am desperate to do what I can to help them avoid the trap of landing in a job and hoping it will be the perfect job. And if they realize it's not the perfect job, moving to a different job and hoping that will be the perfect job. And thinking of this as kind of a static matching process, as opposed to looking for places, industries, organizations, roles where there is the potential for or freedom to make that role more your own, right? While making contributions that are going to be valued by the organization. That if you have room to move, if you have a wider lane, if you can win yourself the right to have a wider lane because maybe nobody's paying attention, or because maybe you've been granted that autonomy, it can happen in multiple ways. That may be a more promising variable to look for than a magical unicorn of a perfect organization or a perfect
Yeah.
industry or a perfect fit.
It sounds a little bit like a relationship that, yeah, of
Yes.
course it's important, the partner that you choose to spend time with. But no less important is after you choose or when you commit is to put in the work or to raise levels of awareness. And it's in the context of relationship, I talk about how movies end where love begins. It's after, they get together and, they love each other. That's when the work begins. And it's in many ways the same when it comes to work or
Yes.
finding your calling at work. Yeah, it's important to find the right place, right fit. These things matter for sure. And
Yes.
then the work begins.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And in fact, just yesterday, one of my students said, is it kind of the same in romantic relationships?
Oh,
And I said, it absolutely is. I said, there are probably more than just one person on the planet with whom you could form a very meaningful partnership or marriage or relationship. And what it's about is finding someone who is compatible enough or a good enough match, and then making something of that that is really a worthwhile and hopefully, beautiful life. And I see work in the same way. Can you find something that is promising enough that matters to you, even if you don't know why the work matters to you, but it just feels like this is important in some way, even if you can't articulate it? Can you get involved with that and be able to find or navigate to ways of engaging it or ways of contributing to it that matter for you? I think that is the trick of being able to have a working life that feels engaging and motivating and meaningful.
yeah. Sandy just sent in the chat relationship crafting. Is that the
Yeah.
next book, Amy? Maybe,
I,
please.
I would need to know more about relationship science, and there's already so much we know about it. But yes, I mean, I think, the idea that the relationship is created every day as opposed to it's found once and just, sets off perfectly from there, makes an enormous difference in how people engage.
Yeah, because the approach then is, to use Carol Dweck's framework of, a growth mindset, whether it's to your work or
Yes.
whether it's to your relationship.
Yes. In fact, I'm glad you raised this because one of the most recent studies that I've done in this area, so this is a study that I did with Justin Berg, Adam Grant, Jennifer Kurkowski, and Brian Welly. We went into an organization globally. We did a global field experiment across multiple offices of a company. And one of the things that we did was we looked at what would happen if we tried to instill in people a growth mindset or a malleable kind of mindset about themselves in the work, that they could grow and change and be able to fulfill this role, right, in a way that they most desired, versus what job crafting is, which is essentially, what does it mean to make the job the malleable target, right, or the target that is capable of change,
Wow.
growth, right? Because you can't job craft unless you look at the job description, unless you look at the work and think, I can or I have rights to, or I'm going to anyway, change elements of this job. I see what the job description is. I'm going to make some edits. I'm going to make some tweaks and I'm going to enact them, whether my manager knows about it or not. And that requires seeing the job as malleable in some way. And turns out that's a very powerful intervention.
Wow. You know, it reminds me
What?
it reminds me of a study by my mentor, Alan Langer, who does a lot of work on mindfulness, where she asked, she had two groups of people. One group, she gave them an eraser. And she said to them, this is an eraser. Find uses for this eraser. And they found, you know, a few uses for an eraser. Yeah, you can erase with it. You can maybe, you know, use it for other things, whatever. And the second group, she gave them the exact same eraser. And she said, this could be an eraser. And then she asked them to find different uses for that. And the second group found so many more uses for the same eraser. So in a similar way, you know, this is your job description. Well, this could be your job description. It could be something else. And then you find creative ways of morphing it so that you can find more of a sense of calling.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
We're gonna open it up for questions in just a few minutes. If you do want to ask a question, you need to go down in your Zoom to reactions, and then just click on hand up, raise hand, and then you can ask a question, and we'll call on you. But before we do, you know, Amy, I've been again talking about you and your work for years, and many of my clients are now using your very accessible and straightforward tool. And I'd like to urge our viewers, listeners, to go online and go on jobcrafting, one word, jobcrafting.com. And there you'll find a tool that was designed by Amy, by Justin Berg, who's today at Stanford Business School, and Jane Dutton, who you did the original research with. That I remember reading when he just came out. So go jobcrafting.com. It's so accessible. It makes so much sense, and it makes a profound difference. And I found it very useful as a consultant to use it with my clients and to use it myself. So please go online and check it out. Amy, unfortunately, 5 hours are past, and we have to call on questions from the audience. But I look forward to their questions and to continuing this conversation later as well. So let's start with Miguel. Miguel, can you unmute yourself, please?
Hello. I'm here with Hugo, my partner in business here. We're working with Job Crafting since 2013, and we've seen some changes right now. We think we're very excited about the moment of work because job descriptions and the structures are more fluid. And I wonder what is the impact of making this for structured conversations in companies using the job crafting methodology to instead of career planning, the structure, what I have to do to reach the manager level, those things are more fluid now. So to bring up meaningful contributions of the people and the impact of doing also what we call here, but I don't know if there's research on that, on what we call team crafting. A lot of people changing their tasks, changing their relationships, changing their cognitive perceptions, and aligning together, converging to a collective, meaningful outcome. So, what is your perspective on group crafting and making these things constant rituals in organizations?
Yeah, these are both great questions, and I'll start with the team level one. So One of the things that I've also seen in my work with my colleagues is that job crafting, if an individual is doing it in a highly interdependent setting, meaning if you craft, everybody else, you don't want an improvisational pilot, right, in a cockpit. And so if this is something where it needs to be coordinated, or it's better if it's coordinated with the other people on the team, we've seen teams use this at the team level, which essentially then looks like solving for a system of equations, right? Around, maybe I don't enjoy the report writing as much out of our projects, but you love that. And I love time with the clients more than you do. And so we can optimize in ways that everyone who's in the team is getting more of what it is they're seeking from the work. And the work as a result is likely to be more motivating. In that instance, I would say it becomes important for whoever's leading that process to be careful to have some kind of mechanism to handle what happens if there's a set of tasks or a set of relationships or interactions that everyone would much rather push into the middle and leave there and not take more of. In fact, they want less of it, right? Because crafting can be about reducing the boundary in addition to enlarging the boundary. And so having a mechanism for that, either an equitable way of sharing the remainder, if you will, or if possible, outsourcing elements of that remainder, if that's something that's workable, makes a lot of sense. To your second question about what does it mean in a time where there's more fluidity around, how roles evolve or how people may move through organizations, I think this makes job crafting all the more valuable because it becomes more necessary to do it. And unless people are thinking proactively about what it is that would enable them to bring more of their values and strengths and passions to the fore in the work, they run the risk of just getting lost in what they think the organization most needs from them, which certainly matters, right? But not allowing themselves to show up in a way that could create much better alignment between who you are in the work and what the organization most wants to see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel and Hugo, for your question and for what you do. Thank you. I'm thinking as they were asking their question, that if you as an individual focus more on crafting your work, even if you don't have these conversations, you're going to have an impact on the rest of the team or people who come in touch with you. Again, Alan Langer talks about emotional contagion. I think there is also crafting contagion. When people see others who are on fire, who are passionate, that affects the rest of the group.
Yes. I think part of it is, seeing, sometimes we become, even people who are in higher level jobs where they have more autonomy to shape how they do the work. I think once we feel we've either been handed a job description or that we have solidified what we think the job description is, that we tend to treat that as quite fixed. And so being exposed to others who are taking different types of paths with the same work or are engaging it differently or seem to be having a different experience, I think can become quite powerful in the way that you've described, in allowing us to see that we don't have to do it the way we've been doing it. We don't even have to do it the way they're doing it, but that we may think about a third way that would be, again, more relevant for the kind of experience we're most seeking from the work that we do.
Right. Thank you for that. Teresa, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I am just considering how autonomy in my job. I am a communication skill consultant for my clients. So I work with them how to communicate better in English and how to do this management of a global career in their lives. And I deal with lots of interviews that they have to go through to look for a company where they can work at that can provide more value to them, in a sense that they don't even know what they are exactly looking for. So they come to me saying that maybe in their career, if they speak English well, they could have more opportunities. And then I ask questions about the kind of opportunities that they have been looking for, and people rarely have a very precise answer of what their expectation towards their jobs are beforehand having any conversation with anybody else that potentially would hire them for a job. So my job here is to clarify and have ideas in their minds that are, first of all, clear enough for themselves. Then we look for a match. And then the matching that we have been looking for in the market is most of the time some like a kind of a path that they have never thought of, because they look at their job descriptions and they start to tick whatever they have from the expectation of the person or the company who is about to hire them, or potentially you will hire them. But when I present this absolutely opposite way of understanding themselves and having self-awareness and communication techniques and a bunch, like a set of skills that will probably be valued by anybody that we don't know yet who is, we start to do this matching much more, in my opinion, smartly than if we just start to check what they expect from the people that are looking for jobs or looking for better opportunities. So when I am here with you listening to the conversation that you have presented to us, I just think about how much of fear there is in the market, in my local market, which is very in need of lots of basic needs. Like people work in most of the poor countries in the planet because they absolutely need to have any kind of resource to basically many times cope with the survival premises. So
Yes.
when we talk about looking for happiness at the workplace or in a career, or even having this idea that I have a calling, not a job, sometimes it seems very far from these kind of more present idea every single day in the mind about the bills to be paid. So I would like to ask you guys, how much of how much you struggle with the barriers of survival needs up to the moment that we start to talk about happiness, not even feeling ashamed of talking about happiness when people are majoritarily looking for, how to survive, especially in poor countries as mine. So that's my question.
Thank you, Teresa.
So
Thank you.
I'm also interested in Tal's answer to this, because I love this question, because one of the things that I can say definitively from the field of research that I'm in is that for people for whom work is a means of economic survival, and that is the primary focus that they have, is finding some way to be able to take care of the basics of life through their work, and that is an effort and a process that's ongoing. There's evidence to suggest that though that is kind of very salient and front of mind, in terms of the kinds of things people want to experience from their work, the kind of relationship they would like to have with their work, that does not vary as a property of financial need or education or training. And so I often have the experience with my students where they will say sometimes, and they don't know, I think they don't fully appreciate what they're doing when they say it, when they say, well, but people in those kinds of jobs don't care about XYZ. They just care about the paycheck. And the reality is quite a bit more extreme, which is, though the paycheck is absolutely essential and they need to focus greatly, right, on where the next paycheck is coming from and is it enough to cover the basic needs of living and so on. In terms of if you survey and collect data from those populations, what they want and seek from the work is not that different from what the students who are sitting in those seats are seeking from the kind of work they want to do. And so for me, the implication of that is, given a magic wand, what I would hope for everyone is that the work that they did paid enough for them to not have to worry as much about their financial stability or ability to survive. And that within that, given that people are often seeking the very same things from the work that they're doing, regardless of where they are in a socioeconomic hierarchy, what can we do to imbue work with more of the kinds of elements that allow people to find meaning in the work that they do, to allow them to see themselves as a person who is held in esteem in the society that they work in? And so, that's my response to that first question. And to your first point, I just want to say, I think there's a lot of wisdom when someone is in a job search to think about, well, what if you could write, like, forget the market out there, forget the postings, forget who's hiring. If you could write what it is that you most want to do, whether that's a target or a focus of an industry or an effort that you want to get involved in, or whether that's just, I don't care what industry it is, I want to do work that involves the following kinds of activities. Starting from there gives people much more of a shot of authoring an experience of work or finding the kind of work that is going to be more motivating and more sustaining of them as people in the long term. Job crafting is a bit different because it takes the job as a starting point. You have to kind of already be in the job and know the guts of the job and the outlines of the job to think about how would you revise those. But for a job search, and certainly for students, getting them to think about, if you could just write anything about what it is that you'd be doing or what you'd be involved in because it matters to you, why not start there and then see if you can make that happen, as opposed to, pulling down applications from things that are being offered.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and for the answer. I just want to say a couple of things about responding to Teresa and also commenting on what you said, Amy. So I'm often asked a similar question when I talk about a sense of meaning and purpose as being so central to a happy life. And when I talk about finding meaning at work, people say, but what about? And I can't tell you how many times I got this very specific example. What about a single mom who holds 3 jobs? How can you talk about her about calling in the workplace? And Amy, your answer is spot on. I must say that's not the answer I usually give, but it's spot on, because these things of relationships or a sense of meaning from contribution very often are not socioeconomic dependent. You can find, and that's why your first study was on janitors in hospitals, not in the medical doctors. You replicated it with the medical doctors, but you first started with the janitors. So that's very, very important. The other thing that I would add to it is that, and this is a mantra that I repeat a million times, to my students and to myself, is small changes make a big difference when consistently applied. So even if that single mom with 3 jobs finds, 2 hours a week of something that is really meaningful and purposeful for her, these 2 hours will have a trickle effect, both on what comes before, because she's looking forward to it, and what comes after, because she's energized by it.
Yes. Yes.
And in the same way that calling, purpose, passion is contagious outward, and it has a trickle effect to other people, it's also contagious inward, in that it affects what comes before and what comes after.
Yes. I think that's beautiful. And I think, one of the things, to just for a moment go back to the hospital janitors, that we found was in other work that we've published, Jane and Galaya and I, we found that they were subjected to many interactions in the hospital that were enormously devaluing of them as people, of the work that they were doing, of the role that they played there. And within that context, where some very painful things would happen to them, given how status arranged hospital systems tend to be, what they were finding was, in these interactions with patients, in these interactions with visitors, they were someone who represented the hospital. They were someone who worked for the hospital and were part of the team that was there for the patients and visitors, and were often treated and interacted with in a way that was highly valuing and affirming of their humanity, of the contribution they were making, of the things that they were able to do to help. others. And so it was even the small move of moving yourself away from aversive interactions where you had the ability to do that and move yourself more into the space of interactions that would affirm your humanity and affirm the fact that you are making a difference for people who really need your help and need your involvement, was a small thing, as you put it, as you say, but made a profound difference for their experience of not just showing up for the job, but how they thought of themselves in that role.
Beautiful. Thank you. So I'm learning a lot here, and I'm sure everyone is. And I think it's time to say thank you, not to end, but to say thank you to the person who reached out to you, Amy, from at the very beginning, thanks to whom we're having this conversation. And this is Astrid, who has her hand up. Thank you, Astrid, for making this happen.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And Amy, thank you so much for making the time to be with us. And we miss you at Yale, but we're excited for you at Wharton. So it's great.
Thank you.
I actually have two questions for you. First, how do you institutionalize job crafting so that it becomes a practice? And I've been doing a lot of work lately with clients around strengths. And how would you incorporate strengths in job crafting? So that's one question. And the second question is, I read about you when I first started on positive psychology. I read your work and Happier by Tal at about the same time. So you two are two of my mentors and role models. Thank you for that. And I'm just wondering, what is the latest manifestation of your research on job crafting? Because I'm sure it's evolved over the years.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Astrid, and it's wonderful to see you. I miss you too. I'll say, first on the point of strengths that and institutionalizing job crafting, that in the exercise itself, the jobcrafting.com exercise, one of the things that it focuses people on in this process of thinking about what would it mean to craft the job that you're in, and where might you have degrees of freedom to make changes, and what might those changes look like. One of the things that we get people to think about is what are the strengths and values and passions that show up for them when they think about the domain of work. And there, the kinds of, Strengths Finder, the VIA Strengths Finder, there are all kinds of wonderful tools that are out there that people can use. Those can often be inputs to thinking about, wow, if I really have a strong affinity or ability in a particular area, how might I bring that strength into my work? It becomes a natural part of the process of thinking, how do you build that in, or find opportunities, or see where you could connect that strength to the tasks that you're doing or the people that you're interacting with in the work. And in terms of institutionalizing it, I'm glad you asked this question. This one makes me nervous, right? Because in the hands of very well-meaning managers and compassionate managers who care about their employees, you could quickly imagine making crafting more of the part of the job description. And okay, now we're gonna, this person's crafted this way. It seemed to be, a beautiful thing. How can we get other people to do that same thing? The thing that I think is crucial to remember around institutionalizing job crafting is that the crafting moves that people are making, the changes that they're making to the work, really need to be driven by them. If it's not coming from the thing that you most want to maximize your exposure to, or the people that you want to build relationships with, or what have you, then it's another task demand that's being imposed by the organization. And so in that way, I think the best thing managers can do is to help people realize that this is something that they recognize, employees may want to do, that they want to help support it to the extent that they can, right? And obviously there are limits to that. If you are the person on the IT desk at your organization and you decide you want to become the company guitarist, that might not work out so well, right? You need to be, fulfilling the duties for which you've been hired. But I think there's a lot that can be done around giving people support and autonomy and guidance where they need it or where they want it about how to perhaps direct their crafting if that's relevant or appropriate, but trusting them to undertake it. And I've told managers that if you are made nervous by the idea of job crafting. If you think this is not something I want my employees doing, the thing I can assure you of, based on research that's been done in this area, is that your employees are doing it anyway. They're just hiding it from you because they can sense that you're not going to be open to this. And so given that it's happening regardless, to think about as a manager, do you want to be trying to work with that momentum and work with that tide in a way that's going to be productive and supportive of people's humanity at work? Or are you going to try to tamp it down in ways that are likely to backfire in any number of ways? You also asked about the latest in job crafting work. So there is so much good research happening in this area. You know, seeing some of the names that came up in the folks who are here today, some of those people are here. Wonderful research happening, great books happening. Richard's been asking, do you have a book? I have never written a book. I tend to stay in the trenches of research projects and research studies and doing that kind of work. Maybe someday I'll write a book, I don't know. But the work that most excites me about job crafting now is work that looks at more kind of controlled experiments, field experiments that are happening in workplaces, to more carefully understand what are the boundaries of this activity, what is the impact, the ripple effects, that Tal was talking about, that this is having, because so much of the early work in this area was correlational work that looked at, are people who are crafting having better experiences? And it becomes impossible to know, is it that people who are having a really great experience of their work are more likely to craft, or does it go the other way, right? And so the paper that came out this past year with Justin, Adam, Jennifer, and Brian is one that really tries to get careful about pinning down the different elements that seem to be driving the effects that we're seeing, so that we can both understand the phenomenon and the process better, but it also puts us in a better position to be able to give credible and helpful advice to organizations and to people working in jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esprit. Luciana.
Hi, Amy. Hi, Tal. First of all, thank you for being such an eye-opener. I think we're all very now in another world. I didn't even know this really existed. Even though throughout how the conversation is going, I think I've done it at some points in my life,
Yes.
or helped others around me. But yeah, I think it's very magical what you're sharing. And I had a question. Recently I've been hired for a consultancy service for an a company that's going to expound. Like in 6 months, they're going to go to 8-10 countries. And what they do is business around happiness. Their teams, their pilot project, it has 30-year-olds with artists that are like having the masters and everything. And the project is beautiful, but they're leaving the company. They're staying for a couple months. It's been open for like 8 months, I think, and they're leaving. So one of the main owners told me, I don't know if I need to accept that there's going to be this kind of turnover rate, or there's something I can do. So I haven't had that question where I'm going to ask them more about really what is it that they're doing for organizational well-being and all that. But my question is, does job crafting work for any kind of turnover rate? And then my second question would be, what would be the barriers that one finds when we try to hold talent, because he has talent, with this mindset? Just cognitively, I think we're all know Tal talks about change.
Was eager to hear what I talk about, and then
Yeah,
we lost it.
it
So
froze.
Amy, how about you just respond to the first
Sure.
question?
Yeah. So I think, around it's essentially a question about the limits of job crafting. I mean, I think in this position, the thing I would most want to know is, why is it that people are moving on, right, from the position? Could it be that this is an organization that provides the perfect springboard that people need to move to something that they're very excited to do? Or could it be that they are coming thinking they're going to spend a long time here and within a few months realize there is no way that I can stay here? Those are very different kinds of situations. And so you'd want to know, what kind of universe are you in? But the other thing that I'll say is, you know, one of the most powerful things someone ever said to me after doing the job crafting exercise in the job that they were in was, if I had done this in my last job, I don't know that I would have left it. And they said it with a real sense of regret and kind of recognition that maybe there would have been other ways to make, you know, the work that they had been in work out better or work out for longer. So I do believe that, you know, in all kinds of work, that this can be a useful practice, you know, for helping people find what it is that's going to root them into the meaning of the work that they're doing, and just learning more about, well, what is that composed of, or what does that look like, and what can the organization do more to, you know, provide, and what is it that is up to the individual to kind of to bring into this is going to be perhaps most essential there.
You know, Amy, that's why it's so important that you're teaching what you're teaching and others are teaching about job
Let me
crafting
find my earbuds.
at the
Oh my goodness. I was listening to a lecture and looking at my hummingbirds I photographed on Monday.
all right.
Oh my
All
goodness.
right. Good.
did
So why it's so important that you
that
teach
was the
this,
descanso day with the baby
this material. Sorry,
ducks.
I'll find.
Yeah, and with my complications,
Okay. So going back to our conversation, this is why it's so important that you're teaching this material early on. So when people are, you know, in business school, you know, then presumably they go on to, you know, management roles as well, and then they can teach it and pass it on to their employees.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have we don't have that much time left, but I do want to hear more people. So if you ask a question, please make it brief, and Amy will make our responses a bit shorter so that we can get through. I don't think we'll get through everyone, which means you'll have to come back. Sorry.
That would be lovely.
As many as we can. Philip, it's good to see you.
Good evening. Thank you equally. Good evening, Amy. My name is Philip, and my question is about I mean, it's a beautiful concept, and now let's talk to the manager. Let's talk to the head of the organization. And what would be the argument you would give to the head? You hear me? Yeah, you do.
Yes.
What would be the argument you would give to the head of the organization
Mhm.
so that
Okay.
he does promote job crafting among the members of the organization?
Okay.
Mm.
So here, it's a great question. Here's the argument I would give. The argument I would give about promoting it is at the heart of this paper that I just mentioned. So we were interested in looking at, is this good or bad for the organization, right? The concept and the theory of job crafting is very much focused on the individual employee and worker, which has always been my focus as a psychologist, right? I am primarily concerned with the experience that individuals are having of their work. I care about, but I'm less concerned about what is it that organizations are experiencing there. But obviously that matters, right? So I start with the individual, and then you have to care about the system. So in this study, we're looking at what's happening with people's level of performance, with people's level of happiness and engagement with the work, right? Which ought to matter to the leader and manager, to see, is this something that harms organizations, right? You could imagine job crafting run amok where people are doing all kinds of deviations that are not good for the organization. What we find in this study is that people's performance does not show decreases from engaging in job crafting. It either, depending on the condition, shows no change or increases over time. And that's performance as judged by the person's manager and the person's closest coworker, who were blind to the condition that they were in the study, which matters, I think, quite a bit in terms of the fidelity of the result. And so for that reason, the thing that I would suggest to company leaders, organization leaders, and managers is the more you can help people understand and internalize the mission and the vision of that organization. What are your strategic goals? What are you trying to make happen? The clearer the employees are about that, the more they can think about ways to craft their work in ways that help to implement what it is that the organization most wants to have happen. Having that alignment will only augment the performance of that individual in the role, but that ought to roll up into more effectiveness for the organization as well.
You
Thank
said
you.
if the goal of the organization is clearer, then what is the relation to the job crafting?
So the relation to the job crafting is if I know what it is we're trying to make happen here and
Yeah,
why,
yeah.
I can do a better job of thinking about, well, I could arrange my relationships with clients this way or that way. If I've internalized and deeply understand what it is we're trying to accomplish here, I can do a better job of doing that in a way that helps to support that organizational
So both come
goal.
together. So the
Yes.
private goal comes together with the organizational goal when I promote
Yes.
job crafting.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mo, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, yes, mine's a simple question. The number one thing I read nowadays is organizations should concentrate on the well-being of employees. But when you look up definitions, there's so many. So the question to both of you is, what is your definition of well-being, and which research definition of well-being do you use?
Oh, I'm going to look to you first on that.
Okay, happily. So I'm going to be very brief because I do want to hear from other people as well. But there are many definitions to happiness. There's no right one, of course. Our definition comprises 5 elements. Spiritual well-being, which is about meaning and purpose and presence. Physical well-being, which is about nutrition, exercise, rest, recovery. Intellectual well-being, that's the 3rd element, which is about deep learning. It's about curiosity. Relational well-being, which is about relationships. It's about kindness, generosity. And finally, emotional well-being, which is about learning to deal with painful emotions and cultivating pleasurable emotions, like gratitude, like joy, like love. Spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, together making up the SPIRE acronym. This is our definition of happiness.
Okay.
Over to you, Amy.
So I'm so glad that I went with my impulse to hand that to you first, because I knew that with the SPIRE model that you had a much more thorough answer than what typically gets used in the field that I'm in, which is studying people's sense of subjective well-being, which can sometimes be boiled down to just a couple of items about, in general, how they feel like their life is going, or how happy, engaged, or satisfied they feel with their life. And one of the things that we know, and why I'm fascinated with work, is that prior work suggests that up to 20% of the variance in that kind of global question is accounted for by what's happening in someone's work life. If you think about how much time and energy people spend in their work, it makes sense that, even if you're looking to kind of push the work away, to not think of it as being definitional of the self and so on, given how much time, energy, attention goes to that domain of life, it stands to reason that it has a measurable impact on people's overall well-being and experience of their lives.
Thank you. And Mo, just last week or 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation in our webinars about how do you measure happiness on a national level? Is it based on your subjective well-being? Do you go deeper than that? And these are very important questions for the field of happiness studies in general. Thank you for your question. Juan Carlos.
Hello. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Not very well, unfortunately.
Maybe like this. Is it better?
Yeah, a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, let me try to go quick. Amy, I used to work for corporate companies most of my life, probably 30 years. And I've seen a lot of people really enjoying their jobs and others not. And then I got engaged with the Gallup research about engagement. And I found that 8 out of 10 people are not really engaged with their jobs, right? Which is a very scary statistic. And when I learned about job crafting, I love the concept. I said, wow, I should learn about this 30 years ago. But what I see now is that the problem is becoming worse with young people, with the millennials and the centennials, with this immediate reward that they look for. They are not happy with their jobs, even though they have a good position in good company and good salary. They seems that they are never satisfied, and I even see that with my kids. Well, the kids are 28 and 30 years, and they are not happy at their jobs. So, is there any recommendation or any study specifically for this generation that could help them to engage or to help them find this satisfaction and using job crafting to help them engage more?
It's a profound question, Juan Carlos, and I have two very frank, I guess, reactions to it. So on the one hand, and maybe this is will sound cynical of me to say, but it's hard to not recognize that organizations, I think, have begun to reap what they have sown. And if they're not making long-term investments in people, if they're not trying to make paths and sort of homes, if you will, professional homes for people over the long term, then what is likely to get yielded from that are people who are not necessarily looking to organizations as, work organizations as places where they want to invest a whole lot of their identity and meaning, which again, for me, given that I study work and not organizations, matters. And so what that signifies to me is that the target should become not an organization, right? That feels like it's the right kind of organization to work for, because I feel like a lot of those contracts, implicit or explicit, have kind of broken down, but rather to think about what is work, an effort, a problem that, various organizations are trying to solve, or an opportunity that various organizations are trying to move into or take advantage of, that feels important for that person and worthwhile for that person, where the organization is the vehicle as opposed to the focus. And then figuring out how to get yourself involved in a role in that work that can sustain you, that feels meaningful rather, maybe even despite the organization for which it's happening, I think becomes a more stable source of meaningfulness and purpose. There's a paper that I love by Tom Bateman and Bruce Barry called something like Masters of the Long Haul. And it's about people who sustain a high level of motivation over decades of a career. And what they find is the people who have the strongest attachment to the work over a long period of time are people for whom they feel as though the effort they're involved in, kind of what they're throwing their time in on together with other people, may not be solved or figured out in their lifetime, but is so worthwhile that just having been a part of it means something to them. And you'll notice that's not necessarily attached to what company they're doing it for or what organization they're doing it for. It's about what that effort is about. And so, when I'm talking with my own students here, when I'm talking with my kids, one of the things I try to get them focused on is, if you forget about the hiring firms, if you forget about the organizations, what kind of effort could you potentially get excited enough about? And there may be multiple, there may be one that feels that for reasons you may not even be able to articulate to yourself, feels important enough to you that you want to, attach your own work to it through any number of organizations you may travel through over the course of your working life.
Great.
Thank you, Amy.
Great question, great answer. Thank you both. So we have 5 more minutes or 7 more minutes. Hopefully we'll get through 2 more. So Magren, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, thank you very much. I am Magren from Romania, which is Europe, which is a very way away country. And I have been in love with this job crafting. Sorry for my English. And I try to introduce it. I am a trainer and a coach, and I try to introduce it in a program for individuals who want to reinvent themselves. So they work for a job they don't like, and they want to get how do you say to change
transition.
Yes, the transition. And I saw this job crafting like a professional journey guided by the soul. I mean, you put yourself in contact with your soul through the job crafting. First, aligning your tasks means that you align with your values, no? And you spend your time based on your on your values. And then you align your relationship and then your sense and purpose. So my question is, this program is not going very well. I don't know why, because maybe I don't have promotion or it's at the very beginning. But I received a request from a company who said, wow, this is very interesting. How can I use this program to bring back in the office my employee, because they work remote and they don't want to go back in the office? Can I use this? So what do you recommend me to to answer to this company? Can I use this for as a program to to the employee, to make them more aware of themselves, to make them more aware of the importance of the relationships?
I think, you know, if their goal is to use the tool as a back to office intervention, that might be hard to do, because people certainly have expressed their preferences around that. But to your question, I do think it's possible that if you guide people through a job crafting exercise or workshop where they're articulating to themselves what it is that they care most about in the work, what they want more of, what they perhaps want less of, if it becomes apparent to them that closer relationships, more time being interdependent with others in the execution of the job is desirable, it will make it easier for them to see, well, maybe I will go in a couple more days of the week or what have you. But it's a hard outcome to engineer from the outset for the organization, simply because crafting needs to, you know, in some sense come from the individual. The other thing I'll say in response to, I think the effort that you're undertaking is phenomenal in helping people through this process. And just this year, I believe, Herminia Ibarra, who's a professor at London Business School, just put out a new edition of her book called Working Identity. And it's a wonderful resource around how people move from being in a particular line of work to doing something that's quite different, to making the kind of transition that you're talking about. And she does a great research-based discussion of how these transitions actually really happen. Tying it to crafting, you know, sometimes people will craft their jobs in this exercise and realize this is not the right role for them. But at the very least, what the job crafting exercise does is help them see what kinds of things do they need in that next role? What kinds of abilities to bring their strengths and values to the fore in a way that they don't even see possible with job crafting in their current role would they need in the next role? And so there is, I think, a job that job crafting can do, even if the person is looking to transition, because it can give tools and insights that are prescriptive about what it is that perhaps they might be looking for in this next step.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Magren. Thank you, Amy. Final question, unfortunately, Itai.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tal. Thank you, Amy. I have a quick question. So I feel like in recent years, also people I'm speaking with, when you ask them like the why are you doing this work, what is the meaning, they say the benefits I get, the fact that my kids have dental coverage, the fact that I provide for my family, you know, for women having like a paid maternity leave, which is, you know, not to be taken for granted. These are all important, but I feel like they're confusions they're confusing between like those tangibles and the essence. And if we rely too much on the tangibles, it's not sustainable. At some point, we don't understand what is the meaning of the work that we're doing. We're not going to survive there. We're going to be miserable. So what is one advice you can give those people to, again, the tangibles are important, but they're not lasting. So what advice can you give them to help them find like the true meaning of what they're doing?
Yes. So I think, there are two ways to take this. One is to think of the fact that there are many jobs that one could hold that would give those tangibles. Which of those jobs is most worth holding, right? That, kind of taking the fact that they may come with income and benefits and so on, within that set, what feels like it would bring the person most to life. If changing the job is not possible, what within the job could be done? What boundaries could be acted upon to bring in more of the elements that would make the work feel like it's more than just a way to, get healthcare or something like this. The last thing I'll say on this is there's a famous theory, many decades old now, by Frederick Hertzberg, where he looked at the kinds of things that organizations do to tweak and optimize benefits and pay and hours and physical working conditions and so on. And what he finds is getting all those things right doesn't make people very satisfied. It gets them to kind of the midpoint. It gets them to feeling not dissatisfied. And not dissatisfied is better than dissatisfied, but it's certainly not the same thing as satisfied. And so to get people satisfied, the kinds of levers that organizations use that are much more effective for moving people from that midpoint up to feeling really engaged with the work, excited about the work, happy about the work, have to do with things like autonomy, the connection of the work to the purpose of the organization, giving people recognition for the work that they're doing, right? It's all things that are less about the external effects of the work, if you will, or benefits that the work throws off. And it's more about what's happening for the person in the execution of the work.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And again, my question is about the confusion, because for many people, autonomy is like something very privileged they would never have. Like the fact they get like a paycheck every week or every two weeks,
yeah,
is enough for them. I'm just feeling like it's not lasting. It's not sustainable.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with you. And I would say even in jobs where, it is a job that is low level in the organization, perhaps low paid in the organization, even in those kinds of jobs, what we find are people finding, when are they being watched, are they not being watched, where could they take additional autonomy in what they're doing or how they're doing it in ways that are very affirming of their own humanity at work. Even in jobs where you people take that autonomy to great effect.
Pero por un medicamento o por todos.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Happy Passover.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Okay, so unfortunately, we've come to the end of the session. It went by way too fast. Sorry, Sarah and Sita. If you still have a question, feel free to send it to us and we'll respond. info@happinessstudies.academy, and just let us know that you had a question for us, and we will respond. Amy, this was very special for me, very meaningful to me. Thank you. This is what makes my work a calling.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, and I look forward to more research and more work by you. And you said you don't have any plans to write books. There are many people, including the Dalai Lama and Marty Seligman and Sonia Lubomirski and many others who have written and are writing about your work. So it's definitely
that's an honor.
The impact. Thank you for that. Thank you for being with us. And
thank you.
Thank you all for being here. And the way I'd like to end is by sharing with you a video, those of you who are interested in watching. And the video is a collection of experiences from retreats that we at the Happiness Studies Academy have. Because the meaningful calling aspect of our work is, of course, the community. This is what makes our work for us a calling. So here is a video, and take good care of yourselves and others. Bye-bye.
Coming to an HSA retreat is absolutely amazing. To me, the word that comes to mind the most is connection.
So the retreat has been great. We're really connecting, having lunch with people, just the conversations we're having. I actually have found a mentee that I'm going to be working with. I now have a whole bunch of new friends. It's just great. I can't wait for the next one.
For me, it was life-changing, knowing very authentic and generous people from all over the world just open up my imagination to so many possibilities. It makes me just want to improve in so many areas I didn't even know about.
It's just a wonderful experience. It's an experience that I would recommend to anybody. This is my third retreat, and definitely I will be next year in the next retreat, wherever it is.
And people of HSA are really a huge family. I recommend everyone to come and to have this experience. It's a unique experience, you have to do it.
There's so much packed into like 3 days. Yeah. And there's still more to come.
The community is just unbelievably good. You get in here and you know you've got fantastic support in every which way possible.
Didn't expect such a level of preparation, and it is just mind-blowing. You know, they treating us like princesses and princes, or like I'm coming for the best date of my life.
People hug each other, they smile to each other, they support each other, which is amazing because this is not something you can learn. Such a passion towards other people can only come if you have the happiness in your heart and that you care for other people. And the HSI community is the community of people who care for others.